Thank you for joining us for this North Metro TV candidate debate. I'm sitting down with the candidates from Minnesota Senate District 37. Brad Sanford is the Republican candidate, Jerry Newton, the DFL candidate. Both of you, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Tonight, our debate is going to consist of opening statements from each candidate. Then we'll move into a question and answer segment. The questions have been prepared by us here at North Metro TV, and the candidates have not received them before coming into tonight. After that, the candidates will have an opportunity to ask each other a question if they choose. Then we'll move into our closing statements. So we're going to start tonight with our opening statements. Brad, you are in the first chair, so you'll begin first with your opening statement.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for letting me introduce myself to the district and everyone else. I'm a father, volunteer, and a community leader. I graduated from Blaine High School. I've coached youth athletics and taught them the value of sports and what it's like to take those lessons to life and apply them. I've managed a bank where several employees underneath me thrived, and they were promoted underneath my experience. I am a board member for a local animal rescue. I am also a board member for a youth athletic association, and I'm a business owner serving our communities. I got into this race because my daughter many years ago came to me and asked me to correct her spelling test. And she said, actually, just sign off on it, Dad. And I said, well, honey, you know that I always check it, make sure. And she said that you don't have to. The teacher said that all you have to do is sign it. If I don't understand the word, how to spell it, you just spell it as it sounds, and then it'll be correct. And I said, sorry, honey, you're a Sanford, you're going to spell it correctly. So
Thank
those
you
are
for
one
your
of the
opening
things that got me into this.
Jerry Newton, your opening statement this evening.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks for hosting this. I am State Representative Jerry Newton. I currently represent the communities of Coon Rapids, Blaine, and Spring Lake Park, and am running for the Senate and to represent the same communities. However, it would be all of Blaine instead of a portion of Blaine. Our family's been active in this area since 1963 when my father built the Blaine Dairy Store on 109th and Jefferson. And Dad ran that for 23 years while I was in the military. When I retired from the military, I took over the store. Got to know the community members well. Worked with the community on many issues, and was convinced by customers to run for the city council in Coon Rapids, where we had some issues at the time. I did that and subsequently ran for the school board for Anoka Hennepin. Served 6 years on the city council and 8 years on the Anoka Hennepin school board. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. We'll hear much more from our candidates as we now move into our question and answer segment. I'll be pulling the questions out at random. Jerry Newton, you'll be first with our first question to answer it. Our first question deals with a public safety issue. It is clear both nationally and locally that tension is high between segments of the law enforcement community and minority communities. How will you, as a state legislator, work to create an environment to address these issues? You have 90 seconds to speak about that.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Something I've been actually talking to some community leaders about is one of the things we did on the Veterans Committee is we formed through the Post Board, which is the board that controls the police for the state, some training for de-escalation. It was primarily intended for veterans who were going through crisis, and it would help the police to deal with these veterans when they saw them in crisis, and rather than being aggressive with them, to back off to try to get them to respond more logically than being cornered. And we've been talking about expanding that to do the same thing statewide with our police departments, so that we don't have these confrontational situations where, you know, someone is being forced into a situation, they respond, the police in turn respond again, so that we can de-escalate rather than escalate situations. So I think that that's something that we're going to try to look at the legislature, put some money into it, and do some additional training for all law enforcement, and also in our schools. This works well in our schools, and it was something that I learned while I was on the school board, that the teachers, rather than cornering a kid who's acting up, is give the kid a little bit of room, give him a little space, and de-escalate the situation and calm things down that way.
Thank you for your answer. Brad Sanford, same question to you. It is clear both nationally and locally that tension is high between segments of the law enforcement community and minority communities. How will you work as a state legislator to create an environment to address these issues?
Well, Ben, I was driving downtown Minneapolis a couple weeks ago, and I saw a police officer stop someone. He had his hand on his gun, and he was walking up to the car and assessing the situation. I can't imagine being in that situation. These guys are putting themselves on the line every day to serve us and to protect us. And what I would try to do is get the communities together, to work together, to understand where each side is coming from, understand that that police officer wants to go home to his family and his kids, and understand that that person may have something else going on in their life, that maybe they stepped on the accelerator too much, or maybe they were not paying attention, but it wasn't meant as a affront to the police officer or to our society. So I'd make sure that we get everybody to work together.
All right. After each question, you'll both have an opportunity for 15 seconds of rebuttal time if you choose to use it. Jerry, you have the first opportunity for rebuttal time if you choose.
No, I have nothing to rebut.
Okay.
It's-
I'm always going to offer it to both
Okay.
candidates. Brad, if you have any, this is your opportunity too.
No, we're good.
All right, we'll move on to my next question then. This question deals with taxes. Brad, you'll be first on this question. What is one specific change you would like to see made to the Minnesota tax code?
Wow, one specific change. I'd like to see a little bit more relief to our citizens. We have people leaving the state primarily because of the taxes and the increases that we've had. We had a $2.1 billion increase in 2013. That was spread out through everything. And those costs escalate to businesses. And when the businesses take on those additional expenses, they pass on that cost to us, the consumer. So every tax that we implement affects us as consumers. And we need to make sure that we take those into consideration when we're making laws.
All right. Jerry, same question to you. What is one specific change you would like to see made to the Minnesota tax code?
Well, it might be a little surprising, but I'd like to see business taxes reduced and covered by closing tax loopholes, especially business tax loopholes. As it is right now, the smaller businesses are paying a disproportionate amount of taxes compared to the larger businesses who benefit from the tax loopholes and having a staff of corporate lawyers that can find ways not to pay their taxes. So I think, to stimulate business, especially small business, it would be great if we could reduce the overall tax rate and then close those loopholes for the larger corporations.
All right, opportunity for rebuttal time, Brad, if you choose to use it.
I would like to see that implementation also.
Okay, Jerry?
No, I'm
All
fine.
right. We'll move on to the next question. I'm going to keep offering.
Okay.
Are we agreeing too much?
Yeah, I think so.
Jerry Newton, first on this question, dealing with bonding and bonding projects. Do you want to see a bonding bill passed in 2017, and how much do you think should be spent?
I want to see a bonding bill passed in 2016. There still is an opportunity, I think, after the election, depending on which party wins the Minnesota House, that there's still a chance, especially if the Democrats win the House, that the Republicans will realize that they should be working with the governor and Senator Bach to pass a bill this year. But yes, next year, definitely we have to pass a bonding bill. We've been waiting too long to get our bonding, and a tax bill as well, to get that going. And 2017 should be initial bill that would cover the bonding that we had set up for this year. And then in 2018, we would have the normal bonding session, which is generally the second year of the biennium.
You have a little bit more time left. Can I ask you how much you think is the right amount to spend when it comes to a bonding bill?
Bonding, is based roughly on 3% of the overall budget, and that's figured so that we'd be able to pay it back over 20 years without dramatically increasing the amount of debt. So 3% would be in the neighborhood of, I suppose, 1.4 billion, something like that.
Okay. Brad, I'm going to ask you the same question now. Do you want to see a bonding bill passed in 2017, and how much do you think should be spent?
Yeah, I thought we should have saw a bonding bill passed this last year, but 7 senators from the DFL put that put it away. They decided they wanted to put an amendment in at the last few seconds, and that killed funding for roads and bridges up here. We had $40 million that was set to be spent up here. I was just at a briefing last week that said it was upwards of $66 million because they were preparing for a different part of the Trunk Highway 10. So that was a lot of money that was lost for this area that we need to take care of for our businesses and for our citizens to be able to get around safely. So yeah, I think that that should have been done. I think it should be done in 2017. We have a little bit more time, so you're going to ask me what the dollar amount is. You know, I don't think putting a percentage on it is the right way to go about it, just automatically putting a percentage of 1.4 on it. The bonding bill should be done based on things that we need constitutionally for education, for transportation, you know, schools and all those things. And whatever the need is what we should be doing. We also have a general fund that we have excess in. We should be using that before we start taxing additionally to our citizens.
Okay. Opportunity for rebuttal time, 15 seconds.
Yeah,
Jerry.
well, actually, I mean, one thing is that schools and education are never a part of the bonding bill. Bonding is for infrastructure only. And it really wasn't the Senate's action. The Senate's action had nothing to do with the final decision because that money was going to be spent by Hennepin County and not by the state.
Rebuttal time as well.
Well, apparently Jerry thinks that we can hold school out in the air. We have to have funding for the schools that they sit in, so that would be part of the bonding bill.
We'll get
Can
back
we do
to
a
it.
future
We might get back to
rebuttal on that?
education, all right?
Okay.
We'll see if
Yeah.
we get back there. Next question, though, deals with the environment, an environmental question. Are there additional environmental protections that you would like to see put in place if you were a state legislator? And Brad, you are up first on this question.
You know, I was at an MCEA briefing a couple weeks ago, which is Minnesota Citizens for the Environment, Minnesota Center of the Environment of Advocacy. And they were telling me that almost every stream watershed in Coon Rapids is contaminated. That is something that we need to correct. There are, I counted like 4 different watershed streams that were above certain levels that could contaminate our citizens, though that's something that I would address when elected into the Senate.
All right. Jerry, same question. Are there additional environmental protections you would like to see put in place if you were a state legislator?
Well, there are 2, and one relates to what Brad was talking about, was to make sure that we've got buffers on all of our waterways in Minnesota that are at least 30 feet from the waterway itself extending back. And that would help to stop the pollution from running into our creeks and rivers and streams. The other thing I'd like to see is a ban on neonicotinoids on the seeds so that we're not killing off the pollinators, which we rely on in order to keep our food supply going. And that's something that's now being looked at the federal level finally, but it's something that we can implement in Minnesota.
Opportunity for rebuttal time if you choose to use it.
You know, you said 30 feet for the buffer. I would want to make sure that we work with the landowners and make sure that we're taking care of their interests in that also.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with Jerry.
Yeah.
Opportunity.
And you know, we started with 30 feet. That was the original buffer zone that we had started with. And I think the governor came to a compromise with Representative Anderson to 10 feet right now. But I do think it has to be expanded just to make sure, or find an area in between to make sure that we're not having pollution wash off into our waterways.
Thank you. Next question, talking about budget, overall state budget. And Jerry, you'll be first on this. How would you balance the responsibilities of government that government has to its citizens versus the costs associated with those responsibilities?
I'm afraid I'm not quite getting the question.
Government has a responsibility to its citizens to fund things and fund programs.
Yeah.
How do you balance the needs of the community versus how much those needs might cost when you're looking at putting together a budget for the state?
When you look at the budget, the only thing that we're constitutionally obligated to fund is education. That's the only part of the budget. Everything else is open. And a big part of our budget is mandated by the federal government, especially in health and human service areas, where the federal government puts mandates on the states, and to a certain extent with education and some other things, Department of Veterans Affairs. And then the state has to respond by generally, adding to our budget, but passing that on to the counties. For example, most of our health and human services are cared for by the counties. The services are provided there. So the state acts, even though it's in our budget, we act as a pass-through on things like nursing homes, home health care, all of the services that counties provide. And then because the state doesn't fully meet the needs, the counties also then have to come up with taxation in order to meet the rest of the needs.
Brad, same question to you. I'm going to pose, how would you balance the responsibilities government has to its citizens to provide the programs that are needed and wanted versus the costs associated with those programs?
Well, it seems like every session, for a biennium when we're doing the bondings and the bills, it seems like we want everything right now. And we need to prioritize. We shouldn't be spending more than we bring in revenue. During those years, we should be making sure that we're giving a climate where business can grow, make it attractive for people to come to Minnesota so that organically we grow the revenue that comes in here. But I don't think we should be spending more than what we're bringing in, to repeat myself. And I also think that not everything has to happen within a 2-year period. We can spread it out. We can plan. We can say, hey, these are things we want to take care of now, and these are things we can take care of in the future.
Okay. I'm going to give you rebuttal time in a moment, but in case there's any confusion on my question, I just want to continue to flesh this out a little bit more. An idea, too, is rarely someone who gets state funding, whether it be an organization, a city, whatever it might be, rarely do they come and say, you know what, I don't need that anymore, or, in the next biennium, give me less. They're usually asking for, could you give us some more to do more things? When you're looking at all those requests for funding, how would you prioritize? How would you say, all this is needed and it probably can't all fit into the budget. It's never all going to fit in. How would you prioritize when you're getting those requests for funding from local organizations, statewide organizations, what they might be? Jerry, let's take a minute on this.
Okay. Well, first of all, the state is obligated to balance its budget. So we can't spend more than we take in. And it requires an understanding of the legislative process. Is that we hear all of these requests. They all come before the various committees, whether it's for education or health and human services, whatever it is. All of the requests come in. They're much more than we can ever meet. But then through the legislative process, the majority party in both the House and the Senate will determine how much can be spent for each area of concern: education, Health and Human Services, Veterans, Department of Administration. And they'll set that budget for the committees, and the committees then will look at the priorities that they've established, and they'll determine how much is, where the money's going to go. So it's really a technical legislative thing that we talk about. And you'd mentioned before about wants. We have to separate wants from needs. First, we have to deal with the needs, and then we talk about wants.
Right. Brad, let's continue this conversation too. If you were a state senator, you'd be getting all these requests for funding. How would you go through that prioritization that we're talking about, and what can fit into the budget?
Well, I think you hit on it a little bit. You were hinting towards different groups and the money that they want. They tend to spend it on things that they don't need to because they won't get that money the next time that they request it. I think we need to talk about getting them to understand you'll still get a look at your project and look at the merit of it and how they sell it to us and the need to the citizens in the state.
All right. We kind of had a couple questions here, so I'm going to
Yeah.
give you a little bit more rebuttal time, 30 seconds if you choose to use
okay.
it.
Well, and it's part of the process. Actually, when at the beginning of each session during committee hearings, the agency that receives the money, for example, let's take the Department of Education. They'll come before the Education Committee of the House and the Senate, and they'll explain what they have spent their money on the prior session. And then they'll start proposing their new budget. So it's not as if they're going to always get what they want, or that they've got money that they have laying around usually.
Okay. Rebuttal time for you,
Well,
Brad.
I think what we need to do is we need to fund these based off effectiveness, how effective they are and what they do for the citizens, not get caught up in all of the different budget systems that they have. And as Jerry said, the system and how it works. We should be doing it based on effectiveness of their program.
Thank you for that good discussion. Let's move on to another topic. This question is about jobs. Brad, you'll be first on this question. What would you do to help create an environment for job creation statewide in Minnesota?
Well, as I said previously, a lot of businesses are leaving here, just running out of the state because of the taxes. Door knocking a couple weeks ago, I talked to a general manager of a company. They're based out of Coon Rapids, that they're looking to leave the state. The taxation has just become too much for them, and they have 84 employees. So what I'd like to do is be a little bit more active, have everyone and the Chambers of Commerce be a little bit more active in their Grow Minnesota program. Now this is a program where you go out and you talk to, let's say, Jerry, who was the grocery store owner, and you would say, Jerry, what challenges are you running into? What things do you need to be taken care of? Be the liaison between them and the local government, and make sure that he's getting everything that he needs, and make sure that he has the ability to add more jobs and be effective within their community.
Thank you. Jerry, same question to you. What would you do to help create an environment for job creation in Minnesota?
There are a couple things, and one has to deal with infrastructure, and I'll give an example. Baxter Pharmaceutical was looking for a location to bring their international headquarters to Minnesota. And they already had a few smaller facilities located in St. Paul and other places. They looked at Ramsey as a possible location, and they looked at Brooklyn Park. They settled on Brooklyn Park because of the infrastructure of Highway 610. And anyone who's worked with Highway 10, whether you're traveling up north or just trying to get from here to Elk River, you've got stop sign after stop sign. It right away, it stops the development not only of housing but of commerce. So we have to look at what we call the corridors of commerce to make sure that we've got the infrastructure there to make it possible for businesses to not only settle here but to expand and grow.
Thank you. Rebuttal time, Brad?
Yeah, and I would agree with Jerry. I think the infrastructure, roads and bridges, the bill that was killed by the Senate DFL was something that we absolutely should have had. And I think we need to add another lane onto Highway 10.
Right.
And
for
that's my
rebuttal
bill,
time.
is to add another lane onto Highway 10.
Right.
Also, I had the bill to do the Armstrong Exchange, which is already finished. We built a bridge there, and to do another bridge on Ramsey. So step by step, we're going to take care of this issue in Ramsey and to develop this area. And I hope we can go on later to talk about Blaine, the development in Blaine as well.
The next question deals with lawmaker pay and the constitutional amendment that's on the ballot that a lot of people probably don't even know about yet somewhat. But do you support or oppose the constitutional amendment that would give decisions regarding lawmaker pay to an independent citizen-only council? Jerry, you are first on this question.
Yeah, and that's a bill, I probably voted for it, but essentially I'm indifferent because I think the legislature hasn't had an increase in salary for a long time. And one of the drawbacks of that is it discourages people from running for the legislature. I'm retired. I have the luxury of being retired and being able to run for the legislature. A lot of our younger people who are trying to start their lives and get going don't have that luxury. And so, if we have an independent commission, that's a good idea. They'll look at what other legislatures set as a salary, how long they meet, that sort of thing, how large they are. That's a possibility, but it also doesn't negate the opportunity for the legislature to work together, and if they think they need more money or less money, to sit down and vote for it. And I think that the democratic process should work itself out, and we don't necessarily need an independent council on that.
Same question now to you, Brad. Do you support or oppose the constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot this fall that would give decisions regarding lawmaker pay to an independent citizen-only council?
I wouldn't want to see it go to the independent council. I mean, legislators are not going to vote themselves a raise. that just wouldn't be politically correct, right? They're not going to give themselves a raise. They haven't done it for years, as Jerry pointed out. So if you leave it in their hands, they have to answer to us, the voters, if they do that. If you put it into independent counsel, I can see that, getting out of hand.
Okay. Opportunity for rebuttal time, Jerry. if you
No,
choose.
I'm fine.
Okay, and Brad?
No?
Okay. Move on to the next question here. Another question about public safety. And this question is, do you support body cameras for all law enforcement officers? Brad, you're first on this question.
Set this up for you, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Jerry passed, you were on for promoting a bill for body cameras. And yeah, absolutely. I think it's for the protection of the citizens and for mostly the protection of the police. You see nowadays the police are just afraid to do anything. They just, as I said before, the police officer walking up to the car, he felt something that he had to put his hand on his weapon, and I couldn't imagine that. But if he's got a camera that says, no, this is what happened, I think it makes it a lot easier on our police force. And also, I think the bill that they looked at, I read the bill a little bit, it has provisions in there to make sure that you can protect both the citizens' privacy and also things can be redacted by the police force to make sure that everything's protected if they're going through a lawsuit. So I would commend Jerry on being part of that and making sure that that gets through.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And Jerry, same question.
Yeah, and I just think it's important. And it's not only the body cameras, but it's the cameras in the cars themselves. Because if there is a confrontation, it's very easy for those body cams to be knocked away. The one thing that we didn't do in voting for that was provide funding for our police forces to come up with the funding for that. Because you're putting an unfunded mandate on all of the police forces if you do that. So. When we come up with bright ideas, we have to make sure we fund them as well.
Okay. Any rebuttal time wanted on that?
No.
I think
All
we
right.
agree.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about transportation. It's come up a couple times. It's been mentioned a little bit. But sticking to transportation, roads and bridges, not talking about transit here right now, how do you propose to solve Minnesota's long-term transportation infrastructure needs? Let's see, Jerry, you are first on this question.
One of the problems with the current transportation bill, and one of the reasons that Governor Dayton wouldn't call a special session, is that for the first time in history, I believe, of the legislature, transportation projects were earmarked by the legislature, and specific roads were picked. Normally, it's the Department of Transportation that looks at the overall needs of the state and sets the priorities for transportation funding. It's up to the legislature to determine how much money is being put into it. The current bill had, I think, $300 million, which is about $300 million short of the current need. But we can't permit the legislature to do the earmarking, even though I had projects in there. Bills that I co-authored for the bridge over the railroad tracks on Hanson Boulevard, the expansion of Highway 10, the upgrading of Ramsey Boulevard in Ramsey. So, even though I try to get those things and convince the Department of Transportation that those are priorities, it's really up to them to determine how it should be done and to assess their funding based on what the locals are doing as well, what the counties are doing, what the cities are doing, so that we're not doing a patchwork project of transportation.
All right. Brad, same question to you. How do you propose to solve Minnesota's long-term transportation infrastructure needs?
Well, I think we have to dedicate funds to this. We've had this issue for a long time. It's been a political pawn used by the House and by the Senate. And we've paid the price for it. We've seen our bridges just fall. We have bridges that are deteriorating. I think Jerry will tell you $6 million or $600 million a year is not going to do it. It'll maintain it, but we need more than that. And so we need real answers to come up with how we fix these roads and bridges. If we're moving towards electric cars, gas tax isn't the answer because there's not going to be as much spent. If we move towards axles, it's going to be spending more for the businesses, and we can't keep putting the burden on businesses. So, I think the answer is to come up with a solution, and maybe it's using any of the industries that use the roads, whatever taxes they provide, dedicate those. Don't do like the legislature did before and give 60% of it. Dedicate all those funds to the roads and the bridges.
Opportunity for rebuttal time,
Yeah,
first,
and
Jerry.
I don't really have a rebuttal, but just an additional comment. And I spoke with the Commissioner of Transportation about one of the things he's looking at, and that's to come up with a better grade of asphalt so that it lasts longer. That would be one thing where you're not having to resurface the road constantly. And instead of doing it every 20 years, you do it over a period of maybe 30 or 40 years.
Thank you. Brad?
Yeah, I would agree with Jerry. I think I've heard that there's through the business, having been a business banker and talking to businesses, there's a product out there that would last a lot longer, and I think that's something that we need to implement.
All right, thank you. My last question for you tonight deals with unity. This is a question I'm going to ask to every single person that we interview this election season that's in here for a debate. I want to talk about unity. Across America, we are seeing deep divisions being brought up between races, between ages, religions, socioeconomic classes, political parties, and the list could go on probably. How will you work to foster a spirit of unity, both in the legislature and in your community? And let's see, Brad, you are first on this question.
Well, that is a wonderful question, Ben. And it's one that we need to solve. We definitely need to be working together. We think we need to understand the other side. We need to be able to have a civil conversation with someone and not judge them for anything that they see based on that. We need to have a conversation and get to the real core of the issue and solve that problem. Too many times we go in with our guns blazing and think that we know what's going to happen when we actually don't know what's going to happen. Having been a business banker and doing loans up to $30 million, I can tell you I've worked with many personalities. I've worked with many different industries, and it takes a unique person to be able to do that. And I think that that's what makes me a good candidate.
Jerry, same question to you. How will you work to foster a spirit of unity both in the legislature and in your community?
Well, in the legislature, it's working with people from both parties and establishing friendships. It's something that I think is a misconception that most of us in the legislature really do get along well regardless of party. The press tends to make it worse than it is. But beyond that, through organizations, for example, I attend an organization in Coon Rapids that brings people of different races and religions together and sit down and discuss issues and hear their side of things. I go to the mosque. I listen to the Muslim community often. I had the opportunity while I was in the military to live for 7 years in Muslim countries. So it's a matter of being able to appreciate the differences, to celebrate the differences between different communities and races, and and to continue to work. I mean, it's something that's not a one and done thing. Years ago, I was selected by the city of Anoka to head their Civil Rights Commission. When they couldn't find a single person in Anoka to try to bring people together, they asked me from Coon Rapids to head that, and so I've had experience doing that.
Opportunity for rebuttal time, Brad, if you choose to use.
No, I think I think that's something that we have to do, and Jerry's right. It's about getting people to understand each other, which I said previously, and understand where they're coming from.
Jerry?
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Okay. I'm done with questions for you. I hope that wasn't too painful for you. We're going to move in now to an opportunity that we give all candidates who come in here for a debate. You can ask each other a question. And we're going to start with Brad. You'll have an opportunity to ask Jerry a question at this point. And as I told you before we started, please just go straight to asking your question. So Brad, you are up first to ask Jerry a question.
Well, MNsure and the Department of Human Services caused a $300 million expense and cost to us through errors that they had committed. Jerry, would you support the governor in giving those Minnesota executives for MNsure a bonus?
I don't. That's pretty simple. I think that, and I can't see a parachute for anyone, whether it's a golden parachute for someone in the business community or whether it's someone in government. That you get paid to do a job, you do your job, and you shouldn't be expecting anything additional.
All right. Thank you. And you have opportunity for rebuttal time, 15 seconds, if you choose to use it here.
No, I think he gave the right answer.
Okay. Jerry, your
And
opportunity.
because I gave the right answer, I won't ask Brad a question.
Okay. All right. Some candidates do choose that.
Kumbaya.
Yeah.
Let's
So, yeah, so this was your opportunity to ask a question, but if you choose not to, we can move right on to closing statements then. So with our closing statements, again, you both have 1 minute for your closing statements. Brad, you're first.
Well, I prepared something. So, each year we receive promises from politicians that they are set to make big changes. Yet, after their term, the evaluation shows that nothing's been accomplished. We need lawmakers to look for solutions from the perspective of a parent, a student, a healthcare provider, an industry leader. And I believe that education is paramount to our future. Each generation depends on the next one to solve the issues of the day. And that's why Jerry and I are sitting here. A world without that, it just isn't going to play. Our state needs dedicated funding to maintain and improve our aging infrastructure. That is something that I really want to do when I get down to the Senate. Minnesotans have felt the effects of the bad legislation of MNsure and then a bonus on top of that. We need to provide an alternative to the exponential growth of premiums with MNsure. Status quo has serious consequences to the people of our state. When elected, I will bring my business acumen and community leadership to the state.
All right. Thank you very much for participating tonight. Jerry Newton, your closing statement.
Good. Thank you again for hosting us. I have served 6 years in the state legislature and have had, as I mentioned earlier, 8 years on the school board and 6 years on the city council. So I've had quite a bit of experience, and oftentimes it takes that type of experience to be an effective legislator in St. Paul. I have a lot of things that I've been working on, especially the highway funding issues, making improvements at the National Sports Center, specific projects that I'd like to see finished. And I'm hoping that the electorate will see fit to elect me to the Senate so that I can continue the work that I've started. So thank you again, Ben.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, thank you both for coming in today and sharing your views and opinions with us and getting under the bright lights and doing that for us. We appreciate that. So thank you for participating. And I want to remind all of you, you can always head to northmetrotv.com for your complete local decision coverage. On there we have candidate biographies. All the candidates in the local area have been invited to submit a biography and a photo. That's all there for you under the local decision tab. And we have plenty more debates and candidate spotlights as well, just like this there. They're all available for you to watch there on northmetrotv.com, as well as you can find them all on YouTube. Just search for the North Metro TV channel there as well. I've been your debate moderator, Ben Hale, and I want to thank the candidates, Brad Sanford, the Republican candidate, and Jerry Newton, the Democratic candidate for Minnesota Senate District 37. Thank you for watching.